Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Centric. This being a show where we talk about TV shows that are crime dramas. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about The Gentleman, Season 1, Episode 5. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Well, the opening of the episode had Susie sitting down with her dad, and they're having this larger conversation about the role that Eddie has in all of this. The fact of the matter is, Susie recognizes it, as well as her dad. He's taking an interest in Eddie, saying that he's got a talent for it as well, but saying like he's a lot more into it than he's willing to admit. It's like, oh, he's got that dog in him, and it's like, yeah, this is most likely gonna be something he's cut out for, and kind of wants to make this situation a little more permanent. But Susie keeps stressing the point of, yeah, but he's helping us. Yes, he expedited our growth by getting us 2 properties to do our business at and expand, but that's all for the purposes of expediting his exit. But Bobby laid it down, being like, there's no walking away from this. Like, at the end of this year, that's up to him whether or not he keeps his head, because there's no walking out of this business. You don't get to just walk away, because it's also the thing of, first and foremost, you know too much about our operation, and that could be used against us. But I guess it's also like, right, what kind of message did that send if, like, oh, we're in business together, and I just casually let you walk away with all the information you know? It doesn't look good, doesn't reflect upon me. Kind of makes me look a certain way, I think, which I think ends up being this kind of through line throughout this entire episode. But yeah. This all started because they were dealing with the Florian, who's kind of their, on the grander Europe scale, he's the one that kind of helps like sneak a lot of their product through like all these different patrols and stuff like that. But there's been some mishandling of things recently, and Eddie's there with the sit down with Susie and him, because she's like, I don't like the guy. He gets under my skin, so I need you to get a good read of him with your military tactics. And Eddie's able to read his body language. Is like, yeah, the guy's screwing us over. Because it is a thing of, even, I don't know why I was about to call her on name. Susie is saying, like, he wants a 10% increase, sure. He's practically doubling it what he normally gets paid, because he wants 1.5. He won't budge on that, and it's like, well, most likely he's tipping off like the patrols and security just to kind of cause issues for Susie to kind of renegotiate and put things more in his favor. So he's going to make more money off of this. So they have to try and find a different avenue, and both a blessing and a curse at the same time happens when they are attacked and their generators are stolen. At first I was like, oh, is this like, because I was confused. I was like, this isn't Gabrielle and them, are this? I'm like, why would it be? Why would they go after generators? Because I was like, they don't look like those are weed supplies. I'm like, why would they attack when they're there? It's like, no, they're here for the generators. It's actually a whole bunch of kids. There's one like Kellyanne, who's like the oldest, but it's a whole bunch, like 2 other kids in the vehicle with her. Turns out they're travelers. Obviously, the word gypsy was kind of floating around, but obviously, like, that obviously has a very derogatory context to it. I thought it was interesting later on when Sabrina refers to them, and Eddie being like, "Oh, not so loud." I was like, "Oh, is he saying that because like they're rolling up and don't call these travelers by such a derogatory term?" It's like, no, because Eddie was suffering from a massive hangover, and he was like, "Don't be too loud, Mom. I'm still in my recovery phase." But that's what that was about. Anyway, they were able to keep one of the generators and send the kids on their way. Because I figured there was like some BS mixed in when they're like, oh, like, we ran out, so we came and stole one of your generators. You're rich. Like, do you really need both of them? But it turns out they're from the Ward family, which Jeff is like, yeah, they're kind of a family you don't want to mess with. Could be an issue. So Susie and Eddie have to sit down, because it's like, right, do they know what we're up to? Turns out they did. And this whole thing was kind of a show to be like, hey, we want in on your business. We're not gonna like screw the pooch on this. We want a slice of the pie. And I love the whole like, okay, the Ward family gather it up. It's like, intelligible traveler mumblings, and then like Susie and Eddie do the same thing, intelligible posh. And I love that they made a point to underline posh. But yeah, like, they're in business together. I mean, it works out for them. Once again, that's where I was saying the blessing and curse of it, because more so blessing because, hey, now we don't have to work with Florian anymore and have him screw us over. Plus, the nature of how the travelers operate benefits them. They were even hiding the weed in statues. When I think of that like hiding drugs in the Virgin Mary, I'm thinking more like Coke, maybe even pills, because that's stuff I've seen before. I don't know why, like, the thought of it being in, like, it being weed in there is just kind of wild to me, but it you know, because I guess because in my head when I think of like doing hush-hush business about, I mean, once again, it wasn't that long ago the same thing would have been said here in the U.S. when it came to weed, but it's interesting to see, like, weed being treated in the same lane. I mean, once again, I mean, it's not that, you know, because it still happens some places, whereas, like, weed kind of gets put in that same category as, like, your more hardcore, like, shit like Coke and meth. Like I said, it just depends on the place. But either way, it seems like business is good. Oh, that's after they kind of had to break bread, where it's like, break drinks. There was that particular drink that's made from, like, it's made out of, like, 3 different ingredients, which also includes brake fluid, because it's like, yeah, when you're, like, you got to have something to be able to slow the machine down, and it apparently hits quite the punch. Even got Freddie in on it, and they kind of party like animals. I'd almost wondered, like, Eddie and Susie don't really remember, but it does seem like they were kind of getting close. I'm like, did they smash and they just don't remember? It seems like a high possibility. Because I think it is a thing of, Susie actually does like Eddie. Like, I don't think it, like, because even JP, John Paul, who's the head of the family, was kind of implying as much. She's like, no, we're just business, we're more, like, even just saying we're just associates. But I'm like, on some level, there's a part of her that likes him, because it's like, I think there's even more reason why she wants to drag Eddie into the business even further. Not just because, hey, I like you, I think we work well together. It's also, I think we could do so much together, and maybe that could grow not only business-wise, but as individuals, and maybe, but Susie also seems like the nonsense type of person, meaning that she never mixes business and pleasure. But either way, like I said, everything seemed golden. Everyone's benefiting from it. I thought they were giving them permanent residence, but they let them stay at Bassington's place for like a few days, because in his drunken stupor, that apparently Eddie agreed to that. So it did lead to this really interesting scene later on where Kellyanne is kind of being nice with one of the horses, and it's a horse that doesn't get out much. It doesn't like a lot of other people. I guess one of the few people it probably liked was Charlotte, because they referenced her. And then I was like, wait a minute, what's going on here? And looking at them, I was like, wait, are you implying, they outright said it, that Jeff is her dad? Which I'm like, so all 3 of you have different dads? I mean, different parents in some capacity. Well, they have the same, because no, I'm messing that up. Sorry, because like I said, maybe someone had to correct me. I said it in episode 1. I was under the impression, just the way dialogue was said, implying that Freddie has a different mom from Charlotte and Eddie. But then you also had this whole thing here now. It's like, oh, so they had Eddie and Charlotte had the same mom, just different dad. And it makes me wonder, did Eddie and Freddie's dad know that about Charlotte, or was that their kept secret? Because I brought it up last episode. It's like, oh, there seems to be something there. It's like, oh, there was something there. And I wonder, is that an affair that happened after she had already gotten with Freddie and Eddie's dad, and then Charlotte came about? Or, like I said, what does it something that predates that, and then they rekindled the flames and had Charlotte? Or how does that whole thing work? I'm curious at what stage, and it seems like those sparks are still there, because Jeff's happy that, hey, I was able to teach her how to ride a horse. I've always been able to stay close. It's been hard, sure, because she's, Sabrina's coming from the perspective of, I'm sorry, it must have been hard being so close yet so far away, because Charlotte's completely unaware, and Eddie doesn't know, and Freddie doesn't know, and how's that? I mean, I don't know if it really changes much. It probably changes stuff for Charlotte in the long run, but maybe not for Eddie or Freddie, but who knows? Not less like Charlotte does know and they just don't know that she knows type of thing, or I don't know. Just thought that was kind of interesting how they're like, once again, like slowly weaving in that Sabrina and Jeff's situation. It also adds so much context to that conversation from last episode about between like the conversation that Freddie and Jeff were having about kind of a lucky man basically finding his, like I said, I'm butchering the actual phrasing, but it was kind of almost like it's a lucky man who kind of is comfortable and content with where his place is in life and stuff like that. Plus the looks between him and Sabrina, like I said, it adds even more layers and context to that situation. But because business with the Ward family's been going so well, things weren't going well for the Florian. So it turns out he is talking to someone, and you can't see who it is fully. At first I was like, is it Stanley? But then if you look at the silhouette more, you do see some glasses, which Stanley does wear glasses, but looking at the face a little bit, it seemed like, I think that's Stanley's right-hand guy. Now, either Stanley is behind all of this, or his right-hand dude is like trying to make big moves on his own. So this could be his whole operation. Maybe he's the one that was with Gabrielle and them, which, once again, like, I treated Gabrielle and her crew like a separate crew. Like, it never correlated in my head they might have some association with Stanley. Whether it's directly like, no, this is all Stanley's game, or it's like I said, his right-hand man is just like the guy who's kind of like his attaché, kind of like, or liaison, I guess in a means. It's just kind of making his own moves, like, not less. That could be. I wouldn't, like, when they burned the van, like, that didn't scream, like, that didn't seem like that was like a Stanley thing to get his own hands dirty. So that's why I'm like, not unless that's some other associate, but they went out of their way to hide his identity too. So that's what I don't know what to make of it. I said at the time, I was like, not unless that ends up being Jeff or something, but that was a theory I had at the time. It's just like, it got me thinking, because I've been so focused on what Susie said. Like, right, we're not in competition with each other because, first and foremost, we're all in different things. Like, once again, the gospel, you're in the coke business. Stanley, you're in the meth business. We, the glasses, are in the weed business. So we're in different lanes. We don't step on each other's toes. To a certain extent, I could see that, and I've kind of always slid with that and kind of just let that be just like the guiding principle. But I am forgetting, regardless of it, what it is, at the end of the day, you might be in different lanes, but it's all under the same umbrella of drugs, illegal drugs. So it's like, even though we're going down different lanes, it might be a thing of someone else in those other lanes. It's like, how about I swallow every other operation under the umbrella? Like, oh, I might do meth and they might do coke, but who's to say I don't just steal every operation and make it my own? Like, I can run why have a third of the pie when I can have all of the pie? Type of situation. So not less that into, because I was coming at it from like Gabrielle and her group are like weed competition potentially, or maybe they're just trying to get rid of all drugs. That was the point I was making. But like, so it never correlated in my head that they might potentially work for Stanley, like I said, and just depending on how that flows out, or whether it's direct involvement from Stanley, or whether it's just his right-hand man making moves, trying to make a name for himself. Like I said, I could be wrong in that moment, but that specifically looked like his right-hand dude that we've met a couple times. And it's that type of storytelling where it's like, yeah, you've been introduced to the character a few times, so he hasn't really made, like, he's not meant to stand out too much, but he's supposed to be a character that you're familiar enough with that if a twist happens with him, you're like, oh, it's that guy. So it seems like it could be set up like that. We'll see. But obviously the initial thought process was to cause a rift between the Wards and Eddie and the Glass family in the regards of, well, 4 million went missing, which at first, especially because we saw Jimmy texting someone and they're like, address ? And he's like, oh, I have to talk to you later. Well, I don't think you saw the name, but you can only assume it was Gabrielle. Because I was like, why would you go after the money, considering, like, but I guess it's like stealing the money would be easier than stealing the weed. So I'm like, did Jimmy, like, kind of give something up? I mean, to be fair, Gabrielle has been here, so it makes it, I mean, obviously, like, Ward and his JP and his people, it makes sense. Like, he'd be your initial suspect, and it's all too easy to kind of make them be the red herring. And also, they kind of set Jimmy up to be the kind of red herring. Still could be one trickling down the road, but yeah, it just seemed to, my initial thought was like, it's not going to end up being Blanket or something. Well, as we find out later on, it's Keith. Just like the whole like, oh yeah, the security system was kaput. It's like that does seem like an inside job, and it was like, well, we know how Blanket was stepping to JP and stuff like that. I'm like, why would you turn against the glasses? I wasn't understanding that. Well, Eddie confronted JP. They bounced, but then Eddie is thinking about it. It's like, yeah, this is most likely an inside job. If the Ward family was responsible, they would have stolen the money and then bounced immediately. They wouldn't have stuck around. Like, why? Just that's more likely for you to get caught. So they went to go visit Florian, poisoned him, and it's like, cool, we'll give you the antidote. At first I was almost like, you're not like messing with him, right? But it's like, no, you got to make a point. So they actually legitimately did poison him. It's like, we got the antidote, give us a name. We didn't see whose name it was, but it's like, it turns out it's someone they're close to. And Susie's like, yeah, it's kind of disappointing. It's like, well, how you want to handle it? It's like, well, that person knew from the beginning like how this game worked, so they have to accept the consequences. Turns out the person responsible is Keith, but rather than directly dealing with it, they get the Wards to do it, which I think it was interesting. There's even that moment from Keith where he's like, hey, you're not asking Blanket to do it, so thank you for that. You're actually a good person, Eddie. But he also makes the point that this whole thing, like, we're all dead. He's like, I've seen behind the curtain. I know where all the bodies are buried. The fact of the matter is, I know how Bobby operates. Like, you work for him now, Eddie. Because he was making this more of a Bobby issue rather than someone broached you. Because even they can all admit, yeah, this wasn't Keith's idea. Someone else came to him. But whoever it was wasn't, like, trying to sway Eddie to the other side. He's kind of meant to sway him to be anti-Bobby, but not giving him, like, an alternative. Because it's like, well, you don't want to, I guess, do the thing of selling out your operator, your whoever you are working with for this entire time. But because you just want to still throw Bobby under the bus of he's not the best person to work with type of situation. You'll eventually, like, he's going to throw you like under the bus the moment he gets an opportunity to. Also spills the beans about Jethro. It's like, oh yeah, you thought you could trust her? Nope. He's at the bottom of the water or whatever. Like he's swimming with the fishes type of situation. So now it's like, I was curious about whether Eddie would find out. Of course he would, and that would be the line. Like, and it's a bummer too because him and Susie have been getting along swimmingly well, and now it's like, oh, okay, of course there's going to be wrinkles in it. And it's so interesting that this newest wrinkle would come up in this particular regard because Susie was just having a conversation with her dad where it's like, it's little things that are compounding, the phrase I always use is like death by 1,000 cuts. Individually it doesn't seem like much, but after you get up there in numbers, eventually you start bleeding a lot. And it's just like, right, it's just been one thing, the rats scurrying, some of our drugs kind of getting shut down at borders and stuff like that. Like something's going on here. So she's kind of got this feeling about something's like we need to kind of slow down and kind of fix the leaks, kind of bandage up some of these wounds. But Bobby's like, no, full steam ahead. And he has to kind of remind her, this is my operation, I run things. It's kind of been a point I brought up before. How much is Susie doing her own thing and how much of it is just purely following her dad's orders? And, because that was my point last episode of like, how much was that? No, it was like episode 3. It was like the stealing the car thing. I'm like, how much of that really was Bobby and how much was that Susie line? It's like, no, it does seem like she follows her dad's orders. We don't know, like, because obviously we've gotten a little bit with Jack, but not a lot. I wonder, is it Jake? And I have been going back and forth thinking like, no, it's Jack, isn't it? But I'm like, cause I can't remember if they've been calling him Jakey Boy or Jackie Boy. I don't remember now. Her brother. I'll probably remember in the next couple episodes, but he hasn't been as big involved in this as I thought. He's kind of just doing his own thing. It's like, I guess, like, because Susie's always been the more hands-on with this operation, and I don't know if it's a thing if her brother has no interest in it and he steps in when he needs to, but for the most part, he's just kind of been a background character. I would have thought he'd been more prevalent because it's a family business, but like I said, it's more Susie's reign of things, but maybe he'll become a little more involved, maybe going forward. I don't know. It's definitely going to be interesting to see where these developments take us in the long run, especially too because there was that scene between Eddie and Freddie where it was the whole conversation of, why don't you keep doing this? Like, the fact is, you're actually really good at it, bro. But Eddie's like, no, I'm bouncing out of this. But because Freddy's like, I mean, who cares? Live life to the fullest, man. Like, screw the consequences. Fuck the consequences up the ass. It's like, well, the consequences will be fucking you up the ass in like 14 years when you get arrested for, like when you're sitting in prison for like 14 years or whatever. It's kind of the point he was making. And so, but Freddy's talking about like, oh, like I've got a new view of things, new height, and everyone's minds are going to be blown when they see it, which are like, is Freddy making a side deal with someone? It's like, well, if the glasses and my own brother won't respect me, I will go out and find my own venture, and that venture might be connected to all this backstabbing stuff that's happening. Maybe he's kind of, just like Jimmy has kind of inadvertently, for lack of saying it gracefully, he's basically bent over, spread his ass cheeks, and ready for penetration. Because, like, it's just like you're opening yourself up for it type of situation, and you're doing it willingly is my point. It seems like Jimmy's kind of doing that with the Gabrielle of it all, and they're about to get fucked is my point. And I'm wondering, is Jimmy and Freddy kind of giving said people backdoor access to the glass operation? I don't know. I had it in my head that I want to go down the like very explicit route in a metaphorical sense, but I shouldn't have. Maybe I'll cut this. I probably won't. I'll probably be too lazy to do it, but it'll probably stay in. Either way, I'm interested to see where these new developments, these complications take us. Just once again, just as Susie's getting more attached to Eddie, Eddie's finding out, cool, I kind of did for a moment forget who I was in business with, because Susie has, once again, that first episode was an eye-opener of who Susie is, the fact that she had Keith and Blanket beat the ever-living shit out of Pete, but now it's like the things have been, mixed up in some complicated stuff, but for the most part, things with Susie directly have been pretty kosher, and now it's like, oh, like, she had that done, like, this was supposed to be like, cool, you went behind my back and did something I didn't want done. Like, Jethro was an innocent kid, and I asked you not to do this. You seemed okay with it, but you're not, apparently. So what else have you potentially been lying to me about? And even if you haven't lied to me about anything else, you still lied to me about something significant like that. So causes quite the wrinkle. Like I said, at the time that Susie's getting a feeling like there's a storm coming. And so it's going to be interesting to see how they navigate all of this going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I wanted to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.